Struggling with mental health is not a weakness. It's not a character flaw. It's not a defect. Hi, I'm Christian Nielsen, and I'm glad you joined me again this week. May is Mental Health Awareness Month, and I'd like to talk about that a little bit, maybe even share some of my own experience. Working in end of life, working with people in grief, I've mentioned this before, but I am very allergic to statements like God never gives us more than we can handle, or everything happens for a reason, or it's all in God's plan. Statements like that, I have to admit, are very frustrating to me because they bypass people's pain. And the same things are often said to people who are struggling with mental health. God never gives you more than you can handle. And when we make a statement like that, what are we saying? What's the underlying message? Is that you're not good enough. If you can't take what God gave you or what life gave you, you're not good enough. And we have so many messages around us to tell us that we're not good enough. To tell us that if we were only stronger, or if we only took this supplement, or if we only, had made different life choices, everything would be fine. That's not how life works. And in my own belief, that's also not how the divine works. We're each on a journey. And I believe that divine beauty walks beside us in whatever form you may call that. That doesn't mean, though, that we don't face dark times and that we don't face hardship. I think a lot about the 23rd Psalm, about a creator that walks with us. It doesn't say there won't be any dark valleys, just that they'll be with us. But it's important to recognize mental health is not a spiritual defect. Mental health challenges are real, and they happen for a wide variety of reasons. We can't control a lot of what happens in our life, and we can try and control our responses, but even there, we can't always succeed. Because as a lot of trauma experts will famously say, the body keeps the score. So, and to be clear, spirituality, having a spiritual center, seeking meaning can be very good for our mental health, but that's not the only thing. A lot of Christians will say, oh, just turn to Jesus, turn to God, and it'll all be okay. That's not how it works. If you are struggling with mental health, you may very likely need professional help from a licensed therapist and possibly from a physician in the form of medications. Again, turning to medications is not a weakness. I deal with some type 2 diabetes, and I certainly take my medication for that. I see people take medication for all sorts of things. That does not make it a weakness. So maybe I'll share with you a little of my experience. In my life, I've been through a lot of traumas, physical traumas. I had a traumatic brain injury when I was young. Later on in my life, in my 20s and early 30s, I had some strokes and TIAs, which changed my personality in a lot of ways and made it very difficult at times to function. And I had a lot of grief with that, and I had to kind of work toward redefining who I was. Not only things like learning to play an instrument, but learning to understand, who am I now? Because not only does the stress of the stroke change you, but it changes your brain. And I turned to a therapist who helped me redefine that. And I stayed with that therapist through some other life changes, a divorce, from a marriage that was abusive toward me, and a lot of other changes that came. And therapy has been very helpful. I've always worked to be a person who takes time in silence, takes time in meditation, takes time to be mindful. But even that, and sometimes people will say, well, just, mindfulness meditation, that'll just solve all your problems. No, it can help though. It can be a great tool. But about a year or so ago, I really hit a major crisis. For the 2 years leading to that, I had had so many things going on that were making life difficult, to say the least. I started having hearing changes in my left ear, as well as dizziness, and even sound would trigger nausea, dizziness, sometimes vertigo. Everything sounded distorted. And to a musician and a person who works with sound, that was very, very difficult. Thankfully, a surgery helped a lot of that, but not all. And in the past month, I'm actually dealing with some resurfacing of some of those issues. So I'm working through the process of figuring out what's going on there. But then my dad, who has Parkinson's, I've worked with many patients with Parkinson's, never prepares you for when it's somebody you know and love. He nearly died a couple of times, ended up in the hospital and surgeries and infections. And that happened. And I'll never forget my aunt, Kirsten, talking to him on the phone while I was holding it, and her telling him that it's okay to go if that's what needs to happen. Little did I know how that would turn around within only a few weeks. So our beloved dog, Gracie, I noticed very early on, as someone who's worked with people with dementia, that she was exhibiting really classic signs. I guess they call it canine cognitive dysfunction, but basically the dog version of Alzheimer's. And as well as worn out hips. She was very old. She'd been a very active dog in most of her life and was slowing down rapidly. But the dementia got to a point where the restlessness, agitation, it was so difficult. So for about 3 weeks at the end of her life, I didn't sleep. We didn't sleep. She had us up all night. So finally the day came. It was clear that the decline was happening rapidly too, and she was unwell. And she gave me that look that said it was time. And so we brought her, thankfully, to the veterinarian clinic where my wife works. On a Sunday, they came in special for us. And as hard as that was, and heartbreaking as it was, a lot of people that Gracie loved were around her. Not just family, but she loved that place. And she even wanted to go check all the other rooms to see if she was missing anyone when we got there. It was difficult, to say the least. So, after all of the stress and grief, my wife and I go home, take a nap, In the middle of the nap, I get called by the person who is my Aunt Kirsten's caregiver, telling me things have really changed rapidly. So, and for a happenstance, she ended up down in the hospital in Wasika, and wow, did they do an amazing job. So I spent about a week and a half back and forth between there, spending time with Kirsten. She'd always said that she wanted me to play when the time came. So I went over a month without sleep, basically, without very good sleep. And I was definitely starting to feel that, and my Aunt Kirsten did pass away. And we did the funeral, and I ended up doing a lot of the work with her estate, which got a little stressful. But these things were building in my life. And then, last August, somebody who I really, really trusted in my work life, and in some of the digital work that I was doing with churches, somebody I really thought I could trust betrayed me. And I realized had been lying to me for a very long time. And one or two other people had also joined in on that. And after all that I had worked to help support this organization through the pandemic and other things, they decided my work was done. These were just a few people in a community of beloved folks that I love dearly, that I still love, and some are maybe watching now. So, unfortunately, there was a lot of untruth that had happened both leading up to this and after the fact. Now, in the background, what I forgot to mention is somebody very close to me was dealing with very severe mental health problems throughout this time, too. And it happened that that mental health coincided, their mental health crisis coincided with this. It was a real sense of betrayal when this had happened to me, because I had given so much to this organization. And that was when my body and my brain and my mind just hit a limit, where I just couldn't go any further on my own. I felt like I'd failed at a lot of things. And I wasn't sure where I needed to be, even though my intuition had been telling me where I need to go. So it was partly my wife's strong suggestion, but also my own realization that I'd just been overwhelmed. Some of you have heard me talk about the show Shrinking, which is a great program, and about therapists and grief and loss and all of our various struggles in life. But they have a theme song, and one of the lines in the theme song is, "I want to hear myself think again. Help me carry this weight that's dragging me down. Pull me out of the drink before I start to drown. Let the wreckage all sink to where the fishes are frightening. I want to hear myself think again." I think that show was also a really important thing to come across at the time. But I literally felt like everything had invaded my space, my mental health space, and I just didn't have any space to think. And it got really overwhelming. And I really had to think hard about a lot of things. And realizing while I could logic a lot of things through, it's a different story for our emotions to catch up. So I reached out to a therapist. Unfortunately, the therapist I'd had for a long time had retired a few years before. So I had to find someone new. And it took time. It's still taking time. Still a work in progress. But through that work, I felt a sense of resilience. I had to find a way to untangle all of these things that were happening and all of these feelings. And there were some things I could do on my own through spiritual practice, through music therapy practice, through those sorts of things. But I could only do that with my, there's only so much insight we get from just ourselves. So it has been a process that has helped me get back to myself again. And I don't know where things are going to go from here. But I am working to be at peace with who I am. And yes, I can hear myself think again. Without therapy, I would have been in a lot of trouble. And one of the pieces that I've sometimes struggled with, I don't know if you have, but the hardest person to forgive in our lives is almost always ourselves. And I definitely experienced that after divorce, especially when it came to my son. And that takes time. And I'm one of those people that sometimes, like, when this betrayal happened, why didn't I see this coming? I should have. And maybe I did, but I just chose to ignore it. I had to come to terms with the fact also that this crisis, this moment where I felt paralyzed, was not a character defect. I kept just feeling like I should be able to handle this. I should be able to process this better. I help people. I've worked with mental health. I've worked with grieving people, and there is a lot of grief. But it took my therapist saying to me, Christian, who do you know? Who do you know who could have handled all you've been through better than you? Part of me is still like, but it's still me. I should have been able to, I should be able to figure this out and get through it. But she was right. Giving ourselves grace is so hard to do, and it's so, so important. And I want to share with you that if you are struggling, it is okay. Seek help. Seek help. It is not a weakness. It's not a flaw. And no matter how terrible you might feel about yourself in this moment, the world is a better place with you in it. I guarantee that. I often conclude with walk in beauty, which is a Navajo saying, but so many influences in my life have helped me believe that beauty is the answer to a lot of what happens in life. But sometimes we can't see it, and you may not be able to see it right now, in this moment. But through the work, you can find your place back to that place. Maybe you've never been to that place. But there are ways to help get through this. It takes time. It takes effort. And we never fully heal from trauma. That's something that we carry with us. So my hope, my prayer, my intention is that you find a way back onto this path of beauty and recognize even in all of the ugliness of life, there is still beauty. And we don't have to walk the path alone. Peace be with you. Walk in beauty and trust that beauty will find you.